The sky burned orange on the day the Valoran Empire came to Earth. Their ships blocked out the sun. Thousands of them hung in the air like metal mountains. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was terrifying. The war lasted 19 days. 19 days of fire and screaming and death. Human weapons did nothing against the Valoran shields. Bullets bounced off their armor like raindrops. Missiles exploded harmlessly against their ships. The aliens watched humanity fight with the same interest a person might watch insects struggle against a boot. When it was over, Valorans did not kill the survivors. That would have been mercy. Instead, they collected them. Billions of humans were loaded onto massive transport ships and scattered across the Empire. They became slaves, workers, animals to be used until they broke. Taiho remembered the day they took him. He had been an aerospace engineer, a man who designed parts for spacecraft. He had a good life, a small apartment, and dreams of seeing humanity reach the stars. Now he stood in chains, watching Earth grow smaller through a dirty window. He promised himself he would return one day. He did not know how. He only knew he would. They sent him to Camp 17. It sat on a dead moon at the edge of Valoran space. The air was thin and cold. Nothing grew there. Nothing lived there except the prisoners and their alien masters. The camp was built around a massive garbage field. Mountains of broken Valoran technology stretched as far as the eye could see. Cracked ship hulls, burnt reactor cores, shattered weapons, damaged computers. The Valorans threw away more technology in a single day than humanity had created in a century. The prisoners were told to sort through the garbage. They could keep whatever they needed to build shelters. The Valorans called this mercy. They believed they were being kind by letting the humans play in their trash. Taiho saw something different. He looked at the broken machines and saw possibilities. He saw engines that could be repaired. He saw weapons that could be rebuilt. He saw the pieces of a puzzle that the Valorans were too arrogant to notice. He was not alone in the camp. Thousands of humans worked there, sorting through the endless piles of scrap. Most of them had given up hope. They worked because they had to. They slept because they were tired. They ate the thin soup the Valorans provided and waited to die. But some of them still had fire in their eyes. Hannah was one of them. She had been a metallurgist back on Earth. She studied metals and how to shape them. The Valorans assigned her to sort damaged hull plates, pieces of armor to bent or cracked to be useful. She did her job quietly, but her mind was always working. One night, she showed Taiho something amazing. She had taken a piece of Valoran metal and reforged it using old techniques. The same techniques Korean blacksmiths had used for thousands of years to make swords. The result was incredible. The metal became stronger, much stronger. Stronger than anything the Valorans had ever made. Taiho stared at the small piece of reforged metal in his hand. It was beautiful. It was also dangerous. If the Valorans discovered what Hannah had done, they would kill her. They would kill everyone in the camp. But Taiho smiled. For the first time since Earth fell, he smiled. There was another prisoner who caught Taiho's attention. His name was Wujin, and he was young. Too young to carry the sadness in his eyes. He had been a physicist, a brilliant one. He had studied energy and particles and things most people could not understand. The invasion had taken everything from him. His parents, his sister, his future. Now, he spent his days sorting through broken Valoran weapons, power cells, focusing crystals, beam emitters. The aliens considered these parts worthless because they no longer worked. Wujin considered them a gift. He approached Taiho one evening when the guards were not watching. His voice was quiet but steady. He explained that he had been studying the Valoran weapons. He understood how they worked. More importantly, he understood how they failed. And he believed he could build something better. Not better by Valoran standards. The Valorans valued elegance and efficiency. Their weapons were precise and beautiful. But Wujin had a different idea. He wanted to build something ugly. Something brutal. Something that used 3 times the power, but delivered 10 times the destruction. Taiho listened carefully. He asked questions. He looked at Wujin's drawing scratched into the dirt floor of his shelter. The design was crude. It was wasteful. It was everything the Valorans would consider primitive. It was perfect. That night, Taiho made a decision. He would not wait to die in this camp. He would not accept his fate as a slave. He would fight back. But he could not do it alone. He began watching the other prisoners. He learned who they were, what skills they had, what fire still burned inside them. Slowly, carefully, he began to talk to them. He asked questions. He listened to their answers. He looked for the ones who had not given up. The Valoran guards paid no attention. Why would they? Humans were just animals sorting through garbage. They were no threat. They were nothing. The guards were wrong. Taiho found more allies. Engineers who could build, scientists who could calculate, soldiers who could fight. Each one was carefully chosen. Each one was trusted completely. One wrong word to the guards would mean death for everyone, but no one spoke. The prisoners kept their secrets. They worked during the day and planned during the night. They looked at the mountains of Valoran garbage and saw not trash, but treasure. Not scraps, but salvation. The Valorans had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They believed they understood everything about power, war, and dominance. They understood nothing about humans. They did not know that the species they had enslaved was born from struggle, that humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions, that humanity had clawed its way up, from caves to cities to spacecraft, through nothing but stubborn refusal to die. The Valorans had given humans their garbage and called it mercy. They would learn what humans could do with scraps. 6 months passed in Camp 17. The seasons did not change on the dead moon. Every day was the same gray sky and cold wind. But beneath the surface, everything was changing. Taiho had built something invisible. A network of trusted prisoners who shared his dream. They worked in the scrap fields during the day, moving slowly, keeping their heads down. At night they gathered in hidden places and whispered about freedom. The Valoran guards grew lazy. They had watched humans for months and seen nothing but broken spirits. The prisoners worked. They ate, they slept. They caused no trouble. The guards stopped paying close attention. They played games on their devices. They talked among themselves. They looked at the humans the way someone might look at furniture. This was exactly what Taiho wanted. Hannah continued her secret work with the metals. She had taught herself more about Valoran alloys in 6 months than Valoran scientists had learned in centuries. The aliens created their metals using advanced machines and precise formulas. They never thought to try anything else. Why would they? Their methods were perfect. But Hannah discovered something wonderful. When she applied heat and pressure in patterns the Valorans never used, the metal changed. It became harder. It became lighter. It could stop energy beams that would melt normal Valoran armor. She called the new process folding, because it reminded her of how ancient Korean craftsmen folded steel to make swords. She shared her discovery with Taiho. His eyes went wide when he tested the folded metal. A piece the size of his hand stopped a cutting beam that should have gone straight through. The Valorans had been throwing away metal that could be transformed into the strongest armor in the galaxy. Wujin made progress too. He spent every free moment studying the broken weapons in the scrap piles. The Valorans used particle beams that were elegant and efficient. They fired concentrated streams of energy that could slice through enemy ships with surgical precision. Wujin had a different idea. Instead of elegant, he wanted overwhelming. Instead of efficient, he wanted devastating. His design used massive amounts of power to create a beam so intense that nothing could stop it. The Valorans would call it wasteful. Wujin called it winning, but they needed more people, more skills. The weapon Wujin designed was too big for 3 people to build, and even if they built it, they would need soldiers to use it. They would need a plan to escape. They would need everything. Taiho found Yunji in the eastern section of the camp. She had been a naval captain before the invasion. Her ship had fought until every weapon was empty and every crew member was dead. She was the only survivor. The Valorans had captured her floating in the wreckage, still holding her captain's pistol even though it had no more bullets. She was older than the others, with gray streaks in her black hair and scars on her hands from the final battle. But her eyes were sharp, and her mind was sharper. When Tai-Ho told her about the plan, she did not laugh. She did not call him crazy. She simply nodded and asked what she could do. EUNG became the military mind of the resistance. She organized the prisoners into secret units. She created communication systems using hand signals and coded messages. She planned escape routes and identified weak points in the camp's defenses. She did all of this while sorting garbage right under the guards' noses. Minho joined next. He was small and quiet, the kind of person nobody noticed. Before the invasion, he had been a software expert. He understood computers the way musicians understood music. The Valorans had assigned him to a section of the camp filled with broken data terminals. The aliens considered these. The screens were cracked. The cases were damaged. But Minho discovered that some of them still worked inside. He spent weeks learning the Valoran computer language, teaching himself piece by piece from error messages and system logs. One night, he showed Tai-Ho something incredible. He had connected 3 broken terminals together and made them function as one. The screen glowed with Valorant symbols that Minho could read. He could access basic systems. He could send messages. He could cause distractions. The network grew. Sujin was a chemist who worked in a section filled with discarded power cells. The Valorans threw away cells that had lost their charge, considering them dead. Sujin discovered they were only sleeping. Using chemicals she extracted from cleaning supplies and food waste, she found a way to wake them up. Each revived cell held enough power to run a small ship for days. The resistance spread beyond. Camp 17. Yonji made contact with prisoners in other camps through a smuggling network that moved small items between facilities. Messages were hidden inside broken components, passed from hand to hand until they reached their destination. 7 camps joined the conspiracy. 200,000 humans scattered across the Valoran system, all working toward the same goal. They shared discoveries. They coordinated plans. They prepared for the day when they would strike. The Valorans suspected nothing. Their sensors watched for weapons and explosives. They searched for hidden ships and communication devices. They never thought to watch for ideas. They never imagined that humans were dangerous because of their minds, not their muscles. Tai-Ho worked harder than anyone. He slept only a few hours each night. He moved between groups, checking progress, solving problems, keeping hope alive. Some nights he wondered if the plan was madness. They were slaves with no weapons, no ships, no army. They were trying to fight an empire that had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. But then he would look at Hannah's folded metal, stronger than anything the Valorans could make. He would study Wujin's weapon designs, brutal and devastating. He would watch Yunji drill her secret soldiers in hand signals and combat moves. He would see Minho breaking into Valoran systems that were supposed to be unbreakable. He would count Sujin's growing collection of revived power cells, and he would believe. The Valorans had made one terrible mistake. They had put all their broken technology in one place and surrounded it with the most creative species in the galaxy. They had given humans time and materials and a reason to fight. Now they would pay for that. Mistake, in the darkness of Camp 17, beneath mountains of alien garbage, the weapon began to take shape. It was ugly. It was crude. It was made of parts that should not work together. It was going to change everything. 1 year had passed since the fall of Earth. 1 year of slavery and suffering and silent preparation. Now the time had come to build the weapon that would set humanity free. The workshop was hidden beneath the largest scrap pile in Camp 17. Prisoners had dug it out over months, carrying away dirt in their pockets and hiding it in the garbage fields. The space was cramped and dark, lit only by stolen glow panels that gave everything a pale blue color. It smelled like oil and metal and hope. Tai-Ho stood in the center of the workshop, looking at the components spread across the floor. reactor cores that Sujin had brought back to life, focusing crystals that Woojin had carefully selected from thousands of broken pieces, whole plates that Hannah had reforged into something stronger than any armor in the galaxy, wiring and circuits that Minho had pulled from dead computers and made work again. Separately, these were just scraps. Together, they would become a particle lance. Woojin led the construction. His hands moved with careful precision as he connected each piece. He explained what he was doing to the others, teaching them so they could build more weapons later. The focusing crystals had to be aligned perfectly. The power feeds had to be balanced exactly. One mistake could cause the whole thing to explode. The work was slow. They could only build at night, when the guards were tired and the surveillance was weakest. During the day, the workshop was sealed and hidden. The prisoners went back to sorting garbage, pretending to be broken and defeated. Hannah worked on the barrel of the weapon. It was a long tube made from her folded metal, strong enough to contain the massive energy that would flow through it. She shaped each piece by hand, using tools she had made herself from alien scraps. The work left her fingers burned and bleeding, but she never complained. Every mark on her hands was a mark of defiance. The particle lance was nothing like Valoran weapons. The aliens built their weapons with elegance and beauty. Every line was smooth. Every component was perfectly sized. A Valoran weapon looked like art. The human weapon looked like something a monster had made from nightmares. It was bulky and rough. Cables stuck out at odd angles. The barrel was too thick. The power cells were strapped on with metal bands because there was no room inside. A Valoran engineer would have laughed at it, but Woojin had done the calculations 100 times. The weapon would work. More than work. It would do something Valoran weapons could not do. Valoran shields were designed to stop Valoran weapons. They absorbed and dispersed energy beams using carefully tuned frequencies. Every ship in the Valoran fleet had shields that could stop any weapon the Empire had ever created. The human weapon did not follow Valoran design principles. It used a completely different approach. Instead of a controlled beam, it created a concentrated burst of particles so dense and powerful that shields could not adapt fast enough. The energy would punch straight through like a bullet through paper. Woojin called it the fist because it did not cut or slice. It smashed. The night came when the weapon was finally complete. Taiho gathered the core team in the workshop. Hannah, Woojin, Yoonji, Minho, Sujin. They stood in a circle around the ugly, beautiful thing they had created. It was time to test it. They could not fire it in the camp. The energy burst would be detected instantly. The guards would come running. Everyone would die. So Yoonji had found another way. There was an abandoned mining tunnel on the far side of the moon. It had been sealed for years after a collapse made it useless. But Minho had found a way to open the old entrance. They could take the weapon there, fire it into the mountain, see if their calculations were correct. The journey took 3 hours. They carried the weapon in pieces, moving through shadows and avoiding patrol routes that Yoonji had memorized. The cold bit through their thin clothes. The thin air made their lungs burn, but nobody stopped. Nobody complained. The tunnel entrance was just a hole in the rock, hidden behind a pile of boulders. They assembled the weapon inside, working by the light of a single glow panel. Woojin made the final connections. Sujin activated the power cells. The weapon hummed to life, vibrating with contained energy. Taiho aimed it at the far wall of the tunnel. A solid mass of rock and metal, his hands were steady, even though his heart was racing. Everything they had worked for came down to this moment. If the weapon failed, their plan was over. If it succeeded, nothing would ever be the same. He pressed the firing trigger. There was no sound. The particle lance was silent, releasing its energy in a beam that human eyes could barely see. Just a flash of pale light, there and gone in less than a second. But the effect was devastating. The far wall of the tunnel simply vanished. The beam cut through solid rock like it was not there. It kept going, punching through the mountain itself. When the light faded, they could see stars through the hole. The lance had carved a tunnel straight through the moon. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They just stared at the impossible thing they had done. Hannah was the first to break the silence. She laughed. It was a small sound at first, Then it grew until tears ran down her face. She had spent a year working in secret, hoping and fearing and wondering if any of it mattered. Now she knew. Woojin checked his calculations against what he had just seen. The beam had been even more powerful than he expected. One shot from this weapon could destroy any ship in the Valoran fleet. Not damage it. Not disable it. Destroy it completely. Yoonji looked at Taiho with eyes that burned like fire. She had lost everything to the Valorans. Her ship, her crew, her world. Now she saw a path to revenge. They carried the weapon back to the camp in silence. But inside each of them, something had changed. They were no longer prisoners hoping for rescue. They were warriors preparing for war. In the weeks that followed, they built more weapons. Faster now, because they knew what they were doing. The network and other camps received instructions. More particle lances took shape in hidden workshops across the system. The Valorans continued their routines. They watched their prisoners sort garbage. They reported that everything was normal. They had no idea that beneath their feet, humanity was forging the weapons of their destruction. The countdown to liberation had begun. The Festival of Eternal Rule was the most important celebration in the Valoran Empire. Once every imperial cycle, warships returned to the homeworld to honor their emperor. Parades filled the capital cities. Feasts lasted for days. The military commanders drank and boasted about their conquests. It was also the day when the labor colonies had the fewest guards. Taiho had planned for this moment for months. Every detail had been calculated. Every contingency had been considered. The uprising would happen across 7 moons simultaneously. 200,000 humans would strike at the same instant. The Valorans would have no time to respond. The night before the festival, Taiho gathered his team for the final briefing. They met in the hidden workshop, surrounded by the weapons they had built from garbage. 12 particle lances, ready to fire. Hundreds of smaller weapons, pieced together from broken Valoran equipment. Enough power cells to run a small fleet. Yoonji went over the battle plan one more time. Minho would disable the communication arrays first, cutting off the camps from the rest of the empire. Sujin's modified power cells would overload the prison barriers, opening the gates. Yoonji's trained soldiers would take down the guards while the rest of the prisoners secured the facilities. The final objective was the orbital defense platform above Camp 17. It was a massive station bristling with weapons and sensors. Whoever controlled it controlled the space around the moon. Taiho's team would capture it using stolen shuttles and the element of surprise. 2. New members had joined the core team for this mission. Yuna was a pilot who had flown cargo shuttles before the invasion. She had never commanded anything larger, but she learned fast. In secret sessions, she had studied Valoran ship controls until she could operate them blindfolded. She would lead the assault on the orbital platform. Dong Wu was an explosives expert, with steady hands and a calm mind. He had spent weeks rigging the camps with hidden charges. If the uprising failed, if the Valorans tried to recapture the prisoners, he would turn every camp into a fireball. There would be no going back to slavery, freedom, or death. The sun rose on the Festival of Eternal Rule in the Valoran homeworld. Celebrations began with music and lights. In Camp 17, the prisoners went to work as usual. They sorted garbage. They kept their heads down. The guards yawned and checked the time, counting the hours until their shifts ended, at exactly noon. Minho pressed a button on his hidden terminal. Across the system, communication arrays exploded. The signals that connected the labor camps to Valoran command went silent. For the first time in a year, the prisoners were invisible to their masters. 3 seconds later, Sujin's power cells activated. The energy barriers around every camp flickered and died. The invisible walls that had kept humans prisoners simply vanished. The guards realized something was wrong. They reached for their weapons. They tried to call for help, but their communicators were dead, and the prisoners were already moving. In Camp 17, Yeonji led the first wave. Her soldiers had trained for this moment using only hand signals and silent drills. They moved like shadows, fast and deadly. The guards never saw them coming. One by one, the Valoran overseers fell. Some were killed. Others were captured and bound with their own restraints. The uprising spread like fire. In Camp 12, prisoners overwhelmed the armory and seized Valoran weapons. In Camp 8, the command center was captured in less than 5 minutes. In Camp 3, a group of engineers took control of the power station and turned off the lights. Plunging the entire facility into darkness, Taiho ran toward the shuttle bay with Yuna and a team of armed prisoners. Valoran shuttles sat in neat rows, waiting to be stolen. The guards stationed there were already dead, taken down by advance teams. Yuna jumped into the pilot's seat of the largest shuttle and powered up the engines. The shuttle rose through the thin atmosphere, heading for the orbital platform. Through the windows, Taiho could see the chaos below. Fires burned in several locations. Small explosions marked the destruction of Valoran equipment. But the prisoners were winning. He could see them securing buildings, raising makeshift flags, celebrating their freedom. The orbital platform grew larger as they approached. It was shaped like a ring with a central command tower. Weapon emplacements pointed in every direction. Under normal circumstances, it could destroy any ship that came close. But Yuna did not fly like an enemy. She used Valoran approach codes that Minho had stolen from the computer systems. The platform's guns tracked her shuttle, but did not fire. As far as the automated systems knew, she was a friendly vessel. They docked at the main hangar. The doors opened. Taiho led the assault team out with weapons raised. The platform crew was small, just a skeleton staff left behind during the festival. They were not soldiers. They were technicians and administrators who had never fired a weapon in their lives. Most of them surrendered immediately. The few who fought were quickly defeated. Taiho reached the command center and stood before the main console. From here, he could control the most powerful weapons in the system. He could see every ship, every station, every moon. He had come so far from the day he watched Earth disappear through a dirty window. Now, it was time to show the Valorans what humans could do. The first Valoran patrol cruiser arrived 2 hours later. It was a fast ship sent to investigate the communication blackout. The captain expected to find a technical problem, maybe some damaged equipment that needed repair. Instead, he found a human fleet. 7 stolen warships hung in formation around Camp 17. They were battered and mismatched, crewed by prisoners who had learned to fly them in secret. They looked like scrap held together with hope. The patrol cruiser opened fire. Its weapons were precise and powerful, designed to destroy enemy ships with surgical strikes. Yuna gave the order to return fire. The particle lance mounted on her ship activated. A beam of devastating energy crossed the distance in an instant. It hit the patrol cruiser exactly where Wujin had calculated. At the point where the shields were weakest, the Valoran ship did not explode. It simply fell apart. The beam cut through from bow to stern, slicing the vessel in two. The pieces drifted away, dark and silent. On the orbital platform, Taiho watched through the sensors. He saw the Valoran commander's final transmission, a scream of confusion and terror that was cut short when the ship died. More signals came in from across the system. Camp after camp, reporting success. The uprising had worked. 7 moons were free. Thousands of Valoran guards were captured or dead. And humanity had a fleet. Dongwu stood beside Taiho, watching the sensor screens. He had not needed to use his explosives. The camps were secure. But he kept his detonator close, just in case. The Empire would respond. That was certain. Somewhere in Valoran space, admirals were receiving reports of the impossible. Slaves had risen. Ships had been stolen. A patrol cruiser had been destroyed by a weapon that should not exist. They would send a fleet to crush the rebellion. Hundreds of warships, maybe thousands. Enough firepower to crack a planet. Taiho looked at his small, ragged fleet. 7 ships against an empire. The odds were impossible. But humanity had already done the impossible. They had built weapons from garbage. They had freed themselves from chains. They had killed the unkillable and broken the unbreakable. Let the Valorans come. Humanity would be waiting. The Valoran punishment fleet was the largest military force ever assembled to crush a rebellion. 300 warships jumped into the system, their engines burning like angry stars. Battlecruisers the size of mountains. Carriers filled with fighters. Destroyers bristling with weapons. At their head flew the flagship Eternal Dominion, commanded by Admiral Veth himself. Veth was old, even by Valoran standards. He had commanded fleets for 200 years. He had conquered worlds and crushed rebellions across the galaxy. He had never lost a battle. When the Emperor ordered him to destroy the human uprising, he considered it an insult. Sending him to fight escaped slaves was like sending a sword to kill an insect. He expected to find frightened prisoners hiding in asteroid fields, begging for mercy. Instead, his sensors showed something that made him pause. The humans were waiting for him. 47 ships hung in perfect formation between the punishment fleet and the liberated moons. They were ugly vessels clearly built from salvage and scrap. Their lines were rough. Their armor was mismatched. Some of them had cables and pipes visible on the outside. Veth laughed when he saw them. His officers laughed with him. These were not warships. They were garbage pretending to be warships. The battle would be over in minutes. On the bridge of the human flagship, Taiho watched the Valoran fleet approach. Beside him stood his team. Hannah at the weapons console. Woojin monitoring the particle lances. Yunji coordinating the fleet. Minho tracking enemy communications. Sujin managing power systems. Yuna in the pilot's chair. Dongwu ready to fight with whatever weapon came to hand. They had prepared for this moment since the uprising. Every ship had been upgraded with Hannah's folded metal armor. Every weapon had been calibrated using Woojin's calculations. Every crew had been trained by Yunji's methods. They were still outnumbered, nearly 7-1. But they were ready. Admiral Veth opened a communication channel. His face appeared on screens across the human fleet. He was tall and pale, with silver eyes that showed no emotion. His voice was cold. He offered the humans one chance to surrender. They would be punished, of course. Many would die. But some would be allowed to return to slavery. It was more than they deserved. Taiho responded with a single word. No. Veth's silver eyes narrowed. He closed the channel and gave the order to attack. The Valoran fleet moved forward like a wave. Fighters launched from carriers. Destroyers spread out to flank the enemy. The great battle cruisers powered their weapons, preparing to deliver the killing blow. They expected the humans to run, to scatter like frightened animals and try to escape. Instead, the human ships held their formation and opened fire. 12 particle lances activated simultaneously. 12 beams of impossible energy crossed the darkness of space. The Valorans had never seen weapons like these. Their shield frequencies were tuned to stop Valoran weapons. Elegant beams that could be predicted and dispersed. The human weapons were not elegant. They were brutal. The first volley tore through 3 Valoran destroyers like they were made of paper. The ships did not explode or burn. They simply came apart, sliced into pieces by beams that punched through shields and armor as if they did not exist. Veth watched in shock. This was impossible. Humans were primitive. They used chemical explosives and kinetic weapons. They could not possibly have created something that could defeat Valoran. Shields. But the evidence was burning before his eyes. He screamed at his commanders to adapt to find a countermeasure. The Valoran scientists on his flagship worked frantically, trying to analyze the human weapons. They could not understand what they were seeing. The beam frequencies were wrong. The power levels were impossible. The design violated every principle of Valoran engineering. The humans fired again and again. Each volley killed more Valoran ships. The battle formation started to break as captains panicked and tried to evade the deadly beams. Yuna flew the flagship through the chaos, dodging Valoran fire with skills she had practiced in stolen simulators. The enemy weapons splashed against Hannah's folded metal armor and did almost nothing. Shields that could stop any Valoran beam were nearly useless against armor they had never encountered. Minho disrupted Valoran communications, filling their channels with noise and false orders. Ships turned the wrong way. Squadrons separated. The coordinated fleet became a confused mob. Yunji directed the human ships with calm precision. She had studied Valoran tactics for months. She knew how they thought, how they fought, how they reacted to surprise. She used that knowledge to tear them apart. The tide of battle shifted. The punishment fleet, the mightiest force Veth had ever commanded, was losing. Ships fell by the dozens. Fighters burned. Carriers tried to retreat and were cut down before they could jump. Veth ordered his flagship forward. If his fleet could not win, he would kill the human leaders himself. The Eternal Dominion was the most powerful ship in the system, armed with weapons that could crack a moon. He aimed it directly at Taiho's vessel. The two flagships closed the distance. Veth fired everything he had. Beams and missiles and torpedoes streaked toward the human ship. Some of them hit. Armor buckled. Systems failed. Fires broke out in the lower decks, but Taiho's ship kept coming. Wujin aimed the main particle lance. His hands were steady. His calculations were perfect. He had dreamed of this moment since the day his family died. The beam hit the Eternal Dominion exactly where he aimed it. The first shot collapsed the forward shields. The second penetrated the hull. The third reached the reactor core. The Valoran flagship did not explode. It came apart in pieces, breaking like a toy in the hands of an angry giant. Admiral Veth had 3 seconds to realize he had lost. 3 seconds to understand that everything he believed about the universe was wrong. Then his command deck dissolved into atoms. The surviving Valoran ships fled. They jumped away in desperate groups, abandoning the battle, abandoning their dead, abandoning their pride. They carried no victory back to the Empire, only terror. On the bridge of his battered flagship, Taiho stood in silence. Around him, his crew was cheering. They had won. They had defeated the punishment fleet. They had killed the unkillable admiral and broken the back of the Valoran military. But Taiho was not looking at the celebration. He was looking at a star map on his console. One star in particular, a small yellow sun at the edge of Valoran space. Earth. He opened a channel to every ship in the fleet, to every freed moon, to every human who could hear his voice. His words were simple. They were not poetry or grand speeches. They were a promise. We are not scavengers. We are not slaves. We are engineers. We are builders. We are fighters. And we remember everything they did to us. He paused and looked at Hannah, at Wujin, at Yunji, and Minho, and Sujin, and Yuna, and Dongwu. They had started as prisoners with nothing but garbage. Now they commanded a fleet that had humbled an empire. The war is not over, Taiho continued. It has just begun. They took our world. They took our families. They thought they broke us. He pointed at the star map. At the tiny dot that represented home, we are going to take everything back. The fleet formed up around the flagship. 47 ships that should not exist, crewed by humans who should have been slaves, armed with weapons built from scraps. They turned toward Earth and began the long journey home. Behind them, the wreckage of the Valoran punishment fleet drifted in the darkness, a monument to arrogance, a warning to the galaxy. Humanity was coming, and they remembered everything.